Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations on comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Walking Dead. So in this episode, a lot of stuff went down. One big thing is obviously the whole Rick situation, Rick and his group situation, where they ended up coming across those other people who had them surrounded. It seems like basically where they're from, it's like this, I don't know what the proper term would be for it. It's basically like a dump that basically they've kind of just mounted together and just kind of created their own space for it. It's almost their own kingdom, you know. It's like it seems like they've been there since like the very beginning when all this like Walker stuff originally started. They have a very, like, especially their leader, Jadis, because she's the one we really heard talk the most, but it's like they have a very almost, I don't know what would be the proper term to really use to describe it. It's like they have a very interesting way of talking and have a very interesting way of going about things. It's like we don't mess with stuff, we kind of leave things as they are, but we take what we want type of mentality. Like if it's out there in the open, we will take it. If you have something, we will take it from you, but if something's somewhere it's like we leave it be. Like the whole boat situation, apparently they were just waiting for someone to take it because they were actually impressed when they saw Aaron and Rick take from the boat. But it's like that they had their eye on that boat, but it's just like it was stuck where it was, and it's like we'll leave it be. So they were kind of waiting for someone to take it so that they could take it from that person. But then there was that whole trial sort of thing that Rick had to go through. Like she just pushed him off the top. He rolled down and ended up having to fight a walker that had like stuff stabbed all in its body, but it also had a helmet with blades on it. Even at one point Rick tried to grab its head and it like a blade went through his hand. And it was like, holy crap. And what I love about that whole situation, I mean, obviously Rick had to be creative about how he fought it because he didn't have any weapons on him and everything. Kind of had to use the trash around him to kind of catch it off guard and just like, you know. I mean, he ultimately won and everything, but it was just the way they went about it. I was like, that's kind of a little like deathmatch situation. Like I figured it was going to go like that once he fell down. I was like, what's the point? Is he supposed to like work his way through the trash and everything and find his way out or something like that? Or, I mean, I wasn't sure, but then it popped up and it's like, oh, there are going to be others hidden in the trash. It's like, no, just him. And apparently his name is Winslow. Because even Rick is like, oh, so what's the point is like people get dropped down there? That's what that whole Walker situation was about. It's kind of a test people. It's like, no, his name is Winslow. And you have Rick looking like, wait, what? Like it didn't make any sense to him. It's like I said, they're weird in their ways. It's like, it wasn't a test. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's almost like, we wanted to see what you would do. I was like, oh, you killed him. Oh well. It's not like, it wasn't like, it's probably like a heat of the moment where it's like, well, push you down there. Oh yeah, right. Winslow's down there. So I don't know whether it's like they named him Winslow or was it maybe they make it seem like it sounds like it's a guy that was Winslow that they just pushed down there. Like, well, I'm wondering, was he Winslow because that's who he was before and then he became a walker, or is he a walker that they just named Winslow? And they're like, hey, let's put some armor on him and stuff. I'd assume it's the former, not the latter, so. Because going back a little bit, we ended up finding out from Gabriel what went down last episode. The reason why things went down the way they did is because they threatened him, because they were like, he came in, heard the noise in the pantry, but they were like, oh, give us all this stuff. Because basically they wanted back what they, like I said, they stole from the boat. And so, but he was trying to leave clues. So kind of going back to the fact is that it's not like Gabriel was, leaving out on them. He was just trying to help out. He did leave clues and everything, but at first he was kind of scared because it's like, I mean, he had his faith was strong, but then it kind of started to wear down a little bit until he saw Rick, and he was like, yeah, especially when Rick saw him and gave him the nod, was like, yeah, I know you led us here. And he was just like, it made him happy. Because like I brought it up last time, like Rick's like one of the few people who's like, nah, I know where Gabriel would do that. I mean, he's not the only one. Other people were too, but it's definitely like Rick kept the most faith in him. And he's like, that made him happy, because Gabriel, like, he's the most optimistic about this whole circumstance. He's like, yeah, things are going to get hard, but the fact of the matter is we are going to make it through this somehow. It's going to take a little while, but we're going to get there. And I love how, like, he even brings up what I brought up last episode, like how Rick was smiling. It's like, obviously, it's like Rick's like, oh, he sees these great numbers, and he's like, yeah. But it's like, why are you smiling? He's like, well, because there's, I got taught that basically, turning enemies into friends. You take someone like Gabriel, for example, like they helped make Gabriel who he is now. He's very brave. It wasn't always like that. Like when you find, obviously way back when Gabriel was introduced, you learned his past, how he basically locked his entire congregation outside so that they can be eaten just to save himself. So, but very different from the man that's standing before us now. So I also like the back and forth that Rick and Jadis had of basically been like, okay, we'll give you a third. It's like, no, we'll get half. a third, half, and you get back what we stole from you. And it's just like the back and forth, making those negotiations, and then, finally coming to a deal. And it's basically they want guns and stuff. It's like, you give that to us, we'll help you fight this battle of yours. So it's really good because now it's like, now they've got an extra ally. It's like, now we're up to 3 people. We got Hilltop. Well, technically 2 because, even this still is technically 1 because Kingdom is still kind of like, no. And then you have this group being like, maybe if you come through with the guns. So now they have to track down guns, which even Rick was like, oh yeah, Tara, you're going to tell us, Tara, you were out there, so you have to tell us where not to look. And Tara's like, because she knows all about that place with the ladies that she was like promised to never come back or not to tell anyone about. But it's like, she might not have a choice because if they want to do this whole thing about taking down the saviors, they're going to need help. And like, they're going to need this group's help. And the only way they're going to do that is if they get the guns. But like I said, she made that promise. Like I said, she brought it up before. I brought it up before. Like, she told Rosita, like, oh no, there was nothing out there. But now it's like, wait a minute, there was something out there. You lied to us. It's that type of circumstance. I don't know. Like, it seems like Tara was like, obviously she was nervously laughing about it. So whether she tells him or not, we will just have to wait and see. But I think she won't have a choice when it comes down to it. But it really 100% depends on Tara whether she wants to try and keep her promise on. Especially because those people are also screwed over by the saviors, because the saviors killed all the men in their group and everything. So it's like, if Rick can talk to them, I don't know. I feel like even Rick wouldn't be able to convince them, because it's like they might look at Rick and look at him and think of him the same thing as like Negan and his men. So maybe Tara would be the one to kind of convince them, because they do have a connection with Tara. Granted, they did try and kill Tara too, so that's a little iffy. It's like, it's definitely gonna be interesting going down that point. And also the whole Rosita situation, like, the fact is, they were like, Tara's like, we need to go back, patch up Rick, get Aaron checked out, and then we can go look for the guns. But Rosita's like, nah, screw that. Let's go looking for the guns now. If I have to, I'll go off on my own. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, the fact is, we're getting ready for a fight. And, Rosita's point of view is like, no, there's a fight around every corner, because to get the guns, we need to prepare. It's like, basically, she's like, I'm here to bust people up, kill people, steal from people if need be, to make sure that they don't stop us. Like, I'm here to push everyone out of the way that might get in our way to slow us down. Truth be told, it seems like Rosita's in the point where she's out. She wants revenge. She wants a fight. It's like already bad enough, the whole Abraham situation, but then the whole thing between her and Spencer a little bit, and then the whole Eugene situation, and the fact that she took her shot, and that on top of that, it's like that situation got Eugene taken from them, and it got Olivia killed, and it's just, she's got so much anger, not even just towards about the entire situation, more so than anything with herself. It's like, because to our knowledge, she's one of the few people, like, I don't know, it's hard to say where she stands even on the whole Rick situation, because Spencer was very vocal about the fact that he didn't like Rick and didn't trust Rick and everything. I remember, like, Gabriel got super pissed about him. It's like, yeah, you shut your damn mouth. I don't ever want to hear you saying that crap again, because it's like, Rick is a good man type of situation. Because like I said, Gabriel's team Rick all the way now. Has been for a little while, but it's like, Rosita hasn't said anything, so it makes you a question. I don't think it's necessarily she blames Rick. I think it's more of just like, the world is screwy, the world sucks, so it's just part of life, deal with it. So, because Rosita just needs something, an outlet, she needs to punch, she needs to hurt, she needs to kill. More so than anything, the saviors, but she needs something to like satisfy the anger inside of her, at least. So it's like she's going out of her way to look for a battle. Because she, it's kind of like the opposite situation of like Morgan and Garrow, where it's just like they got tired of it. And it's just, for Morgan, it's all that drove him until he had, essentially nothing left until he found a new way. Kind of going along those lines, because like I brought it up last episode, it's like it just takes one thing to kind of trigger the saviors and kind of ruin this whole deal thing. During the Kingdoms meetup in this episode, what we ended up seeing was like, basically that guy, I think his name was Jared, basically still had a problem with Richard because of the last time during the deal, like an altercation happened. And it's like, he's like, yeah, I don't think Richard should have a gun. And it turned into a whole thing again. And now the dude that leads the group is like, yo, Ezekiel, get your people under control. This might turn into a very visceral situation next time. And Richard is just even more so, like, obviously, like I said, just anything could set them off. And it's just like, especially that was a situation from the last time, and he held a grudge against them. It's like, it just takes one grudge to especially when you have someone like Richard who's so against this situation, who's just kind of like, who's ready to fight, because Richard wants an excuse to fight. It's kind of what the big part of this episode was, trying to create a circumstance that would force Ezekiel to act. basically had a plan for him and Daryl to attack a group of saviors that would be driving by, burn their bodies, and basically lead it all to the like trailer he had set up with all the weapons and stuff, and then have that lead them to Carol, which at first Daryl didn't know about it until he's like, oh yeah, it's a lady, what's her name? And Richard kept avoiding. He's like, what, damn it, what's her name? And it's like, it's Carol. And he's like, yeah, she might die or she might survive. Basically, it's like, we need to do this because basically, Ezekiel likes Carol, so if anything, like her death would spark him to be like, nah, screw it, put everything aside. He wants to attack the Saviors because he cares for Carol. It's pretty obvious the way he always goes out of his way to visit her. He even did it this episode too. I'm pretty sure that's what led Daryl to Carol anyway. He's like, oh, I just came. It's like, no, he probably made sure to follow Ezekiel and his people, and he happens to see, he's like, oh, this is where they led him. I figured that would be the case. But nevertheless, Daryl was super not okay with the plan. He's like, screw that. It's like, no, Carol's not going to be part of this. We're not going to do this. He stopped Richard. But Richard's basically like, sacrifices have to be made, which Daryl knows more so than anything, like all the sacrifices that have been made. But the point isn't to sacrifice more people just to win this battle. It's like, no, the whole point is to have as many people survive this as possible, which you could be like, well, that's not realistic because a lot of people are going to die in this. But the point is to not go out of our way to sacrifice people, to fight this situation. Which it does cross my mind, that whole situation before I go any further. I am wondering, will he use Morgan? Because it's like Richard needs an excuse to spark a fight, and it's like, what if he leads it back to Morgan? Like, because the point was Carol, what if he leads it back to Morgan and he gets Morgan killed? And then maybe that will incite Ezekiel. Maybe not as much as it would Carol, and Carol dying would, spark him, but maybe Morgan will. I don't know, just that little look between Morgan and Richard at the end of the episode is like, because they're both on opposite sides of Ezekiel. Richard is all about fighting. Morgan is all about fighting another way just because of his own circumstances. Just because a lot of stuff happened and he just doesn't want to turn back into who he was. He can't do that again. Because I guess for him, he feels like the moment he does, there will be no going back. There's no Eastman there to kind of keep him, put him back on the right track. Which sadly for him, his staff got taken. He's like, could you give that back? That was for someone very important to me that's no longer around, which the staff got. I'm surprised he took the staff. I was so sure he was just going to break it or throw it underneath the car, drive over and break it. But no, he took it with him. So we'll probably be seeing that soon enough. But definitely, they're going to butt heads going forward. Because even Daryl's like, yo, let that crap go. Because Morgan knew, because it came down to the decision. I was like, I'm wondering, is Daryl going to do it? It came down to, obviously he tracked down Carol and was asking her, why'd you leave? She's like, I had to. Essentially, Carol knew, if things got too heated, because she's too scared of losing people. So much has happened over their times, and it's she had to turn herself into, not caring, to be this person that, after everything that's happened, meeting Morgan and everything, talking with him, seeing everything happening, I guess there was a shift in her heart. She couldn't pretend being that person anymore. Because remember, Carol wasn't always like this, especially you compare her season 2 and before. Carol was not like that because, of her own circumstances. But even without her circumstances, she was just a mother. And then she lost her child. And I guess after she lost her child, she was really more so than anything trying to be a different person, to be ready to fight. It was kind of her way of, I guess, kind of doing a similar thing with Rosita. Rosita is fighting through your pain. It's being a different person so you don't have to feel. And I think it finally just caught up with her. And now because she's too afraid of losing all these people that she spent so much time with and she cares about. She's afraid of losing all of them, and she can't go through that again because she knows what would happen is if they kill someone that's important to her, she'd have to kill them, and she would go crazy and have to be that killer again. And she knows the moment she does that, she'd be empty, kind of like how Morgan was, just going for the next kill and not care. It seems like Rosita's almost pushing that level. I mean, at least that's how I see it. So she's asking Daryl, does anyone die? And Daryl does something. I wasn't sure. I was hoping he'd say no, and he did. He was like, nope, no one died. We made a deal with he's not even telling her about the fact that they're trying to fight him, but because he doesn't want her involved because he sees the way she is and the fact that she's crying. She's not the same woman she was before, and he doesn't want to change that. He sees that she chose to be off on her own. She chose not to come back to Alexandria, even to be in a kingdom, just wanted to be on her own because it's she just wants to live her life peacefully. And it's because Daryl cares about Carol's and he's not going to jeopardize that. I'm sure when he gets back to the group, he's going to tell them he came. I'm sure he might not even mention the whole Carol situation because even, because Rick's, like everyone else believes she just went off on her own. But Daryl knows the truth, so I don't know if he'll actually tell Rick or not, because he'll probably be afraid if he tells Rick and them that they might try and convince her to fight. So, because Daryl is being like, Morgan needs to be the one to kind of convince Ezekiel, because more so because Ezekiel does listen to what Morgan has to say. So, because it is definitely getting to that point, because there was that point where Benjamin acted, and it was like, oh yeah, Ezekiel was like, oh, you're very good with that staff, but he's like, you need to learn to think before you act, especially going forward in this whole circumstance, which is like I said, it's a situation, it's just something's just going to go wrong at one moment, and then it's just all going to fall apart. So you don't want it to happen, but it's just a matter of time, especially when it comes to the Saviors. Like I said, you combine that with someone like Richard, because at first he's like, I'm not going to bring Richard anymore, but he was like, no, bring Richard, because it's like, because the point is, it's not for you to change up everything, because it won't, for him, I guess the guy that was talking, it's basically like, it won't change anything if you leave Richard there. Bring Richard so that we can see that he's still, he's here and that everything's under control. Because if you don't bring Richard here, that doesn't change the situation. That basically means he's back in the kingdom with that attitude and not serving us and being like, hey, I need to do what you guys are asking me of. So I will kind of quickly add this in. There's because last week I was looking up a thumbnail picture for last week's episode. I literally came across a spoiler. I won't go into details, but it was an obvious spoiler, and I was like, I know it's a spoiler because I read something about it happening in the comic books, and I see it. I'm like, wait, what? Why would you? It's literally what was like. I don't even know I don't know if it was specifically the episode title I was looking at, because I put in like the season as well as the episode number 2 when I'm looking up thumbnail pictures. That's typically what I do, because because more so that's how I put it in the tags. I know none of this is important, but I kind of have to explain everything first. But I don't remember what it was exactly I put in the search bar, but then it was like one of the first Google images was a spoiler, and I was like, why is that at the top? It wasn't even part of this episode. Like, why is that there? It kind of upset me. It's something I already knew, but now it puts it in perspective, because it's like, okay, there's got to be something that's coming up in the next couple episodes. So if this thing happens, which like I said, I won't spoil it, but if this thing happens, I will point it out, be like, oh, this thing happening is what I came across. So I'm being super vague about it. If you've come across the image, don't say anything what it is. Like, you might know what it is. I mean, you might not, but it's not really important to know. But it just, I don't know, if it messes with me, because now it puts in perspective, being like, oh, it's going to happen soon. Because it was a situation where it's like, well, it's the comic book and the TV show are different in a lot of parts, especially when it comes to characters' depths and stuff like that. So I was like, oh man, really? I knew that was coming, because I knew it happened in a comic book, but then I was like, now it's like, oh, really? Oh, okay. So I don't know. It's just definitely going to be interesting going forward. But even aside from the whole spoiler situation, really quick note, since I am talking about that, do be careful about spoilers. Anything can be a spoiler when it comes to this TV show, because the biggest thing you look forward to with the show is like, you never know where death is coming. It's like, I'm always on edge because you don't know when someone's going to die. There was a whole thing about it last episode. I don't remember if I brought this up too, so I'm going to make a clarification. Denise. I can't remember if it was I think it was the last episode. It might have been, no, it was definitely last episode. Denise is the name I was thinking about that I couldn't think of. Tara's girlfriend. I don't think I left a comment about it, but it like literally right after I finished the recording, I was like, Denise. That's the name I was thinking about. So I'm just throwing that in there. I couldn't think of Denise's they couldn't think of Denise's name last week. So, but nevertheless, but aside from all the spoiler stuff, it's definitely going to be interesting seeing everything going forward. I'm very interested to see how this goes out, because it's like I said, like obviously they're working on this third group, but it's like more so than anything, it's like, what are you going to do about the kingdom? How are you going to convince them? I think that's really going to come down to Richard. I hope he doesn't do any shady stuff. I hope he doesn't lead anything back to Carol. I mean, he knows not to, because he knows Daryl will kill him for it. So that's why I'm thinking Morgan. He's going to try and take Morgan out, because Morgan is like the one that's kind of like whispering in Ezekiel's ears. Not really whispering, but it's like he's one of the other people that Ezekiel listens to. So we will just have to see. Like I said, that them meeting eyes like at the very end of the episode makes me think that. So, but once again, I have to wait and see how that all goes. I also want to make a final note about the fact it's weird seeing Rip super optimistic. He's like, oh no. It's like, oh, I don't know how we're going to get the guns, but we're going to get them. It's like, it's weird when you see him like super optimistic. It's because he's been so pessimistic lately. Like I said, because like Negan broke him down, and it's like, even like Negan said, it's like, oh, you thought you were tough. top shit. Now you find out you're nothing. So, but now we're seeing kind of Rick get that like that spark back to be like, yo, no, we got it. We don't know. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but we're going to make it work out somehow. So it's just kind of interesting seeing that even more so like, but as it like, especially going forward, like like we saw that spark a little bit at the end of, the mid-season finale, and now seeing it continue, not just be there, but it's also like increasing as the episodes go by. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out with the Saviors going forward, especially because he has to beat back some of that optimism if he's around Negan or his people. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.